What if I told you that one of Europe's most powerful medieval states existed long before modern Ukraine, yet most people today have never even heard its name? Long before today's borders were drawn, long before modern Europe took shape. The lands we now call Ukraine were the center of a powerful civilization that connected Vikings, Slavs, and Byzantines. Traders traveled its rivers, kings married into its royal families, and its cities rivaled the greatest capitals of Europe. But much of this history slowly faded from global memory. To understand Ukraine's untold history, we have to travel back more than 1,000 years. In the 9th century, long before Moscow even existed, a vast state known as Kievan Rus emerged around the city of Kyiv. At the time, the Dnieper River was one of the most important trade routes in the world. Vikings from Scandinavia sailed down these rivers, trading furs, honey, and slaves with the powerful Byzantine Empire. One Viking leader named Oleg captured Kyiv in 882 and declared it the capital of his new realm. From that moment, Kyiv became one of the most important cities in Europe. Historians say that by the 11th century, Kyiv was larger and more advanced than many European capitals. But one ruler changed everything. His name was Volodymyr the Great. In 988, he made a decision that would shape the cultural identity of Eastern Europe forever. After exploring several religions, Volodymyr adopted Christianity from Byzantium and ordered the mass baptism of the people of Kyiv. According to historical chronicles, thousands of people gathered along the Dnieper River as priests baptized entire communities in one of the largest religious conversions in medieval history. This moment didn't just change religion. It connected the region to the cultural and intellectual world of Byzantium. Churches, schools, and art flourished. But Ukraine's history has never been simple. Centuries later, a devastating force arrived from the east. In 1240, the Mongol armies swept across Eastern Europe. When they reached Kyiv, they destroyed the city almost completely. One chronicler wrote that the once great capital was reduced to ruins, with only a few hundred houses left standing. The fall of Kyiv changed the balance of power in the region for centuries. But Ukrainian identity did not disappear. Instead, a new chapter began with the rise of the Cossacks. The Cossacks were fierce warrior communities who lived along the frontier lands near the Dnieper River. They valued freedom above everything else and were known for their incredible military skill. One of the most fascinating and lesser-known stories comes from the 17th century. In 1676, the Ottoman Sultan sent a letter demanding the Cossacks submit to his authority. What happened next became legendary. Instead of surrendering, the Cossacks wrote back one of the most famous insult letters in history. In their reply, they mocked the Sultan and refused to recognize his power. The story became so iconic that centuries later the famous painter Ilya Repin created a painting showing the Cossacks laughing while composing the letter. For many Ukrainians, the Cossacks symbolized independence, courage, and resistance. But history again brought difficult times. In the 18th century, powerful empires began dividing Ukrainian lands. The Russian Empire controlled much of the east, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire ruled parts of the west. During these years, Ukrainian language and culture were often suppressed. In the 1800s, several decrees even restricted the use of the Ukrainian language in publications and education. Yet culture survived through poetry, literature, and folklore. One man became the voice of Ukrainian identity during this time. His name was Taras Shevchenko. Born as a serf in 1814, Shevchenko eventually gained freedom and became one of the most important poets in Ukrainian history. His writings spoke about freedom, dignity, and the struggles of ordinary people. Even today, his poems are memorized by schoolchildren across Ukraine. But the 20th century brought some of the darkest chapters. In the early 1930s, millions of people in Soviet Ukraine suffered during a devastating famine known as the Holodomor. Families struggled to survive as food became scarce across the countryside. For decades, this tragedy remained largely hidden from the world, and only later did historians begin documenting the scale of the suffering. Yet even through tragedy, Ukraine's cultural identity continued to endure. Another surprising fact many people don't know is that Ukraine has played a huge role in global science and technology. For example, one of the key figures in early rocket engineering, Sergei Korolev, was born in Zhytomyr in Ukraine. He later became the chief architect of the Soviet space program and helped launch the first human into space. Ukraine also became a major center of aerospace engineering, building some of the largest cargo aircraft ever created. And culturally, Ukraine has long been known for its music, folk traditions, and art. The traditional instrument called the bandura, with dozens of strings, has been played for centuries by traveling musicians known as kobzars who preserved historical stories through song. These musicians were like living history books, carrying the memory of the people from village to village. Ukraine's geographic position also shaped its story. For thousands of years, the vast plains of the region acted as a crossroads between Europe and Asia. Traders, armies, and cultures passed through constantly. This meant the land experienced many conflicts, but it also created a unique blend of traditions, languages, and influences. And perhaps that is one of the most fascinating things about Ukraine's history. Despite invasions, divisions, and centuries of outside rule, the cultural identity of the people never disappeared. It survived through language, music, literature, and the stories passed down from generation to generation. Even today, when people walk through the streets of Kyiv, Lviv, or Odessa, they are walking through layers of history that stretch back more than 1,000 years. Ancient cathedrals stand beside modern buildings. Old cobblestone streets echo with stories of traders, poets, warriors, and ordinary families who lived through extraordinary times. History often focuses on empires and wars, but the real story of Ukraine is about endurance. It is about a culture that continued to exist through centuries of change. A land that once hosted Viking traders, Cossack warriors, poets, scientists, and dreamers. And perhaps the most powerful part of this story is that much of it remained unknown to the wider world for generations. Yet when you look closely at the past, you begin to see something remarkable. Ukraine has never just been a place on the map. It has always been a crossroads of civilizations, a meeting point of cultures, and a land whose history shaped far more of the world than most people realize. And that untold history is still unfolding today.